The Grand City Museum, usually a beacon of art and history, was buzzing with a different kind of energy today. Yellow tape crisscrossed the main gallery, and uniformed officers moved with hurried purpose. The Starry Night over the city, a priceless masterpiece, was gone. Vanished into thin air. Detective Miller, a man weathered by years on the force, ran a hand through his thinning hair. He surveyed the scene, his gaze sweeping over the empty space on the wall where the painting had hung. Frustration etched lines deeper into his face. This was a high-profile case, one that the mayor himself was keenly interested in. And right now, they had nothing. Absolutely nothing. Anything, Johnson? Miller asked, turning to a younger officer dusting for fingerprints. Just smudges, detective. Looks like gloves were used. Professional job. Miller sighed. That's what he was afraid of. No forced entry, no witnesses, and now, no fingerprints. The security cameras were mysteriously down for a crucial 10-minute window the night before, supposedly due to a power surge. Convenient. Too convenient. He walked over to the security chief, a nervous man named Mr. Abernathy, who was sweating profusely despite the cool air conditioning. Abernathy, I need those camera logs again. Every single one from the past month. And I want a full diagnostic report on that power surge. Abernathy stammered, of course, detective. Right away. He scurried off, looking like a rabbit fleeing a predator. Miller knew this case was going to be a tough one. The thieves were smart, organized, and had clearly planned this meticulously. He glanced around at his team, their faces mirroring his own sense of helplessness. They'd canvassed the neighborhood, interviewed museum staff, and followed up on every conceivable lead. But each path ended in a dead end. It felt like they were chasing ghosts. The hours ticked by, filled with fruitless questioning and frustrating setbacks. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the gallery floor. Miller knew they were running out of time. Pressure from above was mounting, and the media was already having a field day. He needed a break. He needed something, anything, to change the course of this investigation. He just didn't know where to look. The room felt heavy with the weight of the unsolved crime. The biggest problem, Miller thought, was the complete absence of anything solid to work with. They had the power surge excuse, which Abernathy was sticking to like glue, but Miller's gut told him it was a lie. He needed proof, though, and right now, he had none. The initial interviews with the museum staff had yielded nothing of value. Everyone claimed to be shocked and horrified by the theft. They all had alibis, flimsy as some of them were. The security guards on duty that night insisted they hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. It was as if the thief had simply walked through walls. They'd even brought in a forensic artist to create a composite sketch based on the guards' recollections, but the result was a generic face that could belong to anyone. It was useless. Miller threw the sketch onto his desk in disgust. Find anything on the black market sites, Ramirez? Miller asked, turning to the tech specialist hunched over a computer. Ramirez shook his head. Nothing yet, detective. These guys are usually pretty quick to try and move high-value items, but it's like this painting has vanished from the face of the earth. The lack of activity on the black market was particularly troubling. It suggested that the thief either had a private buyer lined up or was planning to hold on to the painting for a while. Either way, it made Miller's job even harder. He considered the possibility of an inside job. Someone on the museum staff with knowledge of the security systems and access to the building. Abernathy was definitely a suspect, but Miller needed more than just a hunch. He needed concrete evidence. He ran through the list of staff members again in his head, searching for any red flags, any inconsistencies. Each name brought him back to the same dead end. They had alibis, or at least claimed to. He needed a way to verify their stories, to break through the wall of silence that surrounded this case. Miller knew that time was of the essence. The longer the painting remained missing, the harder it would be to recover. The pressure from the mayor's office was only going to increase, and the media was already starting to speculate about the museum's security flaws. He needed a break, a lucky break. He needed someone to come forward with information, something that could crack this case wide open. But as the hours turned into days, hope began to dwindle. The investigation was stalled, and the starry night over the city remained lost in the shadows. Meanwhile, a few blocks away from the bustling museum, life continued at its usual, quieter pace. Sarah, a kind-faced woman with warm eyes and a cascade of auburn hair, laced up her sneakers. Her loyal companion, Max, a golden retriever with boundless energy, wagged his tail excitedly. It was their morning ritual. Every day, rain or shine, they embarked on their walk through the neighborhood. Sarah loved these walks. They were her escape, a chance to clear her head and enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Max, of course, was always the highlight. His goofy grin and playful antics never failed to bring a smile to her face. Their route was always the same. Down Elm Street, past the bakery with the tempting aroma of fresh bread, around the park with the chirping birds, and then, finally, a loop around the city museum. Sarah appreciated the museum's grandeur, even if she wasn't much of an art aficionado. It was a landmark, a symbol of the city's cultural heritage. Max, on the other hand, was more interested in sniffing every lamppost and fire hydrant along the way. He was a dog of simple pleasures. Sarah chuckled as she watched him bound ahead, his nose twitching with curiosity. Today, however, their routine walk would prove to be anything but ordinary. Little did Sarah know that her observant eyes and Max's unwavering loyalty would soon play a crucial role in solving the mystery that had baffled the police. As they approached the museum, Sarah noticed the unusual activity. The yellow tape, the police cars, the somber faces of the officers. Something was clearly wrong. She tugged gently on Max's leash, slowing their pace. "What's going on, boy?" she murmured, her brow furrowed with concern. Max, sensing her unease, whined softly and nudged her hand with his wet nose. Sarah didn't dwell on it for long. She assumed it was some sort of minor incident, a fender bender, or a false alarm. She continued her walk, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over her. But deep down, she sensed that something significant had happened. And that feeling would soon lead her to remember something that would change everything. The next morning, Sarah and Max were back on their usual route. The museum was still cordoned off, the police presence just as strong as the day before. This time, however, Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. As they passed the museum's loading dock, a fleeting image flashed through her mind. She stopped abruptly, causing Max to bump into her legs. "Wait a minute, boy," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The image was hazy, fragmented, like a half-remembered dream. But it was there, lurking in the recesses of her memory. She had seen someone near the loading dock on the morning of the robbery. A man. He was standing in the shadows, looking nervous and fidgety. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. People often loitered near the museum, waiting for it to open or simply taking a break. But now, in light of the theft, the image took on a new significance. She tried to recall more details. What was he wearing? What did he look like? The memories were elusive, like trying to catch smoke. She closed her eyes, focusing all her attention on that one moment in time. She remembered he was wearing a dark blue jacket, even though it was a relatively warm morning. And he kept looking around, as if he were afraid of being seen. He had a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, obscuring his face. She couldn't recall his exact features, but she remembered a nervous tick in his jaw. Sarah opened her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. She had something. It wasn't much, but it was more than the police seemed to have. She had a description, a vague one, but a description nonetheless. She replayed the scene in her mind again and again, trying to solidify the details. The dark blue jacket, the nervous tick, the baseball cap. These were the pieces of the puzzle that she held in her grasp. But a nagging doubt crept into her mind. Was she sure she had seen what she thought she had seen? Was her memory playing tricks on her? It had been a week ago, after all. Could she trust her recollection? She looked down at Max, who was gazing up at her with his usual adoring eyes. He seemed to sense her uncertainty. He nudged her hand again, as if urging her to trust her instincts. And in that moment, Sarah made a decision. She had to tell the police. Even if her information was insignificant, it was better to say something than to remain silent. It was the right thing to do. However, the decision to contact the police wasn't easy. Sarah battled with her own anxieties and insecurities. What if she was wrong? What if she was wasting their time? What if they dismissed her as a crazy lady who saw things that weren't there? She imagined Detective Miller, the stern-faced man she'd seen in news reports about the robbery, rolling his eyes at her flimsy description. She pictured him politely thanking her for her time and then promptly filing her statement away in the crank calls folder. The thought of facing his skepticism and potential ridicule filled her with dread. She was a private person, not used to interacting with law enforcement. The idea of inserting herself into a high-profile investigation was intimidating, to say the least. She voiced her concerns to Max, who listened patiently, his head cocked to one side. "What do you think, boy? Should I just forget about it? It's probably nothing, right?" Max responded with a soft whine and a gentle nudge, as if to say, "Don't give up so easily." Sarah knew that Max was right. She couldn't ignore what she had seen. Even if it was just a small piece of the puzzle, it was her responsibility to share it with the authorities. But the fear lingered. She hesitated, pacing back and forth in her living room. She thought about calling the police station anonymously, but she knew that wouldn't be effective. They would need to speak to her in person, to assess her credibility. She considered confiding in a friend or family member, seeking their advice and support. But she didn't want to involve anyone else in her anxieties. This was her burden to bear. The weight of her decision pressed down on her. She felt trapped between her civic duty and her personal fears. She knew she had to do something, but she just couldn't bring herself to pick up the phone. The uncertainty was paralyzing. She needed a sign, something to give her the courage to overcome her hesitation. Little did she know, that sign was about to come from the most unexpected source. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but Sarah's internal struggle continued. She tried to convince herself that the police were already on the right track, that they didn't need her insignificant piece of information. She told herself that they were probably dealing with hardened criminals, masterminds who were far beyond her comprehension. What could she, a simple dog walker, possibly contribute to such a complex investigation? She even started to doubt her own memory. Maybe she had imagined the whole thing. Maybe the man she had seen was just an innocent bystander, waiting for a friend or a bus. Maybe she was letting her imagination run wild. As she prepared for her morning walk with Max, she deliberately chose a different route, avoiding the city museum altogether. She wanted to put the whole incident behind her, to forget about the suspicious man and the stolen painting. But as they walked, Max seemed restless and agitated. He kept pulling on his leash, trying to steer her in the direction of the museum. He whined and barked, his usual playful demeanor replaced with an insistent urgency. Sarah tried to ignore him, but Max's persistence was relentless. He tugged and pulled, refusing to be deterred. Finally, Sarah relented. Okay, she said, "we'll go past the museum. But just for a quick loop, okay?" As they approached the museum, Max's excitement intensified. He started to run, pulling Sarah along with him. He seemed to be drawn to a particular spot near the loading dock, the very spot where Sarah had seen the suspicious man. Max started sniffing the ground, his tail wagging furiously. He pawed at the pavement, as if trying to unearth something. Then, he looked up at Sarah, his eyes bright and pleading. In that moment, Sarah understood. Max wasn't just being a stubborn dog. He was trying to tell her something. He remembered their walk that day, the day of the robbery. He remembered the suspicious man. And he was urging her to do something about it. It was the sign she had been waiting for. It wasn't a voice from above, or a sudden epiphany. It was simply the unwavering loyalty and intuition of her beloved dog. And it was enough. Sarah knew that she couldn't ignore Max's message. She had to trust her instincts, and she had to trust her dog. It was time to call the police. Taking a deep breath, Sarah dialed the police station. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke to the dispatcher, explaining that she had some information about the museum robbery. She was transferred to Detective Miller's office. Detective Miller speaking, a gruff voice answered. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her anxieties flooding back. But she reminded herself of Max's unwavering gaze, of his insistence that she do the right thing. "Detective, my name is Sarah Miller," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "I think I may have seen something that could help with the museum case." Miller, initially skeptical, listened patiently as Sarah recounted her story. He could hear the nervousness in her voice, but he also sensed a genuine sincerity. "You said you saw someone acting suspiciously near the loading dock," he asked, his tone becoming more attentive. "Yes," Sarah replied. "It was on the morning of the robbery, about a week ago. He was wearing a dark blue jacket and a baseball cap, and he seemed very nervous." Miller pressed her for more details, asking about the man's height, build, and any other distinguishing features. Sarah did her best to recall everything she could, but her memory was still hazy. "I remember he had a nervous tick in his jaw," she added. "It was like a slight twitch, almost imperceptible, but it was definitely there." Miller scribbled notes furiously, his initial skepticism slowly fading away. He had nothing to lose by following up on this lead. "Can you come down to the station, Ms. Miller?" he asked. "I'd like to get a formal statement from you." "Yes, of course," Sarah replied, relieved that he was taking her seriously. As she hung up the phone, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had done it. She had overcome her fears and taken the first step towards helping the police solve the case. She looked down at Max, who was wagging his tail and licking her hand. "Good boy, Max," she said, scratching him behind the ears. "We did it." Now, all she could do was hope that her information would be enough to make a difference. The fate of the starry night over the city might just rest on her shoulders, and on the keen senses of her four-legged companion. At the police station, Sarah sat across from Detective Miller in a small, sterile interview room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glare on her face. She felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach, but she tried to remain calm. Max, sensing her unease, lay quietly at her feet, providing a comforting presence. Miller began by asking her to recount her story from the beginning, prompting her with specific questions to jog her memory. He listened intently, his eyes narrowed in concentration, as Sarah described the suspicious man she had seen near the museum's loading dock. He was wearing a dark blue jacket, even though it was a warm day, she said, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "I couldn't see his face very well, but I remember he was tall, maybe about 6 feet, and kind of thin. He kept looking around, like he was afraid of being watched." Miller asked about the man's demeanor. "Was he acting nervous? Anxious?" "Yes," Sarah replied. "Definitely. He was fidgeting and shifting his weight from one foot to the other. And he had this tick, this little twitch in his jaw. It was very subtle, but I noticed it." She described the tick in detail, explaining how it was a slight, involuntary muscle spasm near the corner of his mouth. It was a small detail, but she hoped it would be enough to help the police identify the man. Miller leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "And you're sure this was on the morning of the robbery?" "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "I remember it clearly. It was a week ago today, last Tuesday. We always walk past the museum around 7:30 in the morning. Miller nodded slowly. The timeline was crucial. If Sarah had seen the man on the morning of the robbery, it placed him at the scene of the crime just hours before the painting was stolen. He asked Sarah to work with a forensic artist to create a more detailed composite sketch of the man, hoping to get a clearer image of his face. He also asked her about any other details she might remember, no matter how insignificant they seemed. Sarah racked her brain, trying to recall every detail of that morning. She remembered the weather, the sounds of the city, the smell of freshly baked bread from the nearby bakery. She even remembered the color of the man's shoes, dark brown leather. She spent hours at the police station, answering questions and working with the artist. By the end of the day, she was exhausted but satisfied. She had done everything she could to help. Now, it was up to the police to take her information and run with it. She truly hoped that this would crack the case. Back in his office, Miller reviewed Sarah's statement and the composite sketch. At first glance, it didn't seem like much. The sketch was vague, the description general. But something about Sarah's sincerity, about the way she had recalled even the smallest details, convinced him that her information was worth pursuing. He compared the sketch to the museum staff photos, but nothing immediately jumped out. He ran the description through the police database, but there were no matches for a tall, thin man with a nervous tic who owned a dark blue jacket. Most of his team would have dismissed the lead at this point, filing it away as a dead end. But Miller had learned over the years that even the most insignificant clue could be the key to unlocking a case. He trusted his gut, and his gut was telling him that Sarah Miller had seen something important. He focused on the timeline. Sarah had placed the suspicious man at the museum around 7:30 a.m. on the morning of the robbery. That was just a few hours before the painting was stolen. It was also before any of the museum staff had arrived for work. That meant the man could have been casing the museum, planning his entry and escape. Or he could have been an accomplice, waiting to receive the painting after it was stolen. Miller decided to take a closer look at the museum staff, focusing on anyone who had access to the building before opening hours. He pulled up their employee files, scrutinizing their backgrounds, their work habits, and their personal lives. He also asked Ramirez to run a more detailed analysis of the security camera footage, focusing on the time period before the power surge occurred. He wanted to see if anyone had tampered with the cameras or the security system. As he delved deeper into the investigation, Miller began to feel a sense of excitement. He had been stuck in a rut, chasing dead ends and facing mounting pressure. But now, thanks to Sarah Miller and her observant eyes, he finally had a glimmer of hope. He felt like the pieces were finally falling into place. He just needed to find the right way to fit them together. He was determined not to let this opportunity slip away. He knew this was likely the break they needed. Miller started by meticulously cross-referencing Sarah's timeline with the museum's security logs, even the corrupted portions that Ramirez had managed to salvage. He focused on the period between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. on the day of the robbery. He discovered that one employee, a former security guard named David Bell, had swiped his access card at 7:15 a.m. that morning. However, Bell claimed he had only come in to pick up his last paycheck and had left within 15 minutes. Miller reviewed Bell's personnel file. He had been fired a week before the robbery for unspecified violations of company policy. The file didn't elaborate on the nature of the violations, but Miller found that suspicious. He compared Bell's photo to the composite sketch. The resemblance was striking. Bell was tall and thin, with a similar build to the man Sarah had described. He also had a history of anxiety, which could explain the nervous tic. Miller asked Ramirez to dig deeper into Bell's background. He wanted to know everything about his personal life, his finances, and his whereabouts since being fired from the museum. Ramirez soon discovered that Bell had a gambling problem and had racked up significant debts in recent months. He was also unemployed and had been struggling to make ends meet. Miller felt a surge of adrenaline. It was all starting to come together. Bell had the motive, the opportunity, and the physical characteristics to be the prime suspect. He pulled up Bell's address and dispatched a team of officers to his apartment. He wanted to bring him in for questioning and see if he could crack under pressure. As he waited for news from the officers, Miller couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude towards Sarah Miller and her loyal dog, Max. If it weren't for their observant eyes and unwavering persistence, he would still be chasing ghosts. He knew that they were the reason the case was finally heating up. The detail of the timeline was the key. Now it was time to see if Bell would confess. He had a feeling they were close to solving the mystery. The stolen painting would hopefully be recovered soon. The officers arrived at Bell's apartment to find it empty. The landlord informed them that Bell had moved out suddenly a few days earlier, leaving behind most of his belongings. This only heightened Miller's suspicion. A quick search of the apartment revealed little, but Ramirez managed to recover some deleted files from Bell's computer. Among them was a series of online searches for black market art dealers and transportation routes out of the city. Miller issued an all-points bulletin for Bell's arrest, describing him as armed and dangerous. He also contacted Interpol, suspecting that Bell might try to flee the country. The investigation now shifted into high gear. The police were determined to track down Bell and recover the stolen painting. They set up surveillance at airports, train stations, and bus terminals, hoping to intercept him before he could escape. Meanwhile, Miller decided to pay another visit to Mr. Abernathy, the museum's security chief. He wanted to know more about the circumstances surrounding Bell's firing. Abernathy, visibly nervous, claimed that Bell had been fired for repeated tardiness and insubordination. But Miller didn't believe him. He suspected that Abernathy was covering up something. He pressed Abernathy harder, reminding him that he could face criminal charges if he withheld information. Finally, Abernathy cracked. He admitted that Bell had been caught snooping around the museum's security room after hours. He claimed that Bell was just curious, but Abernathy suspected that he was trying to disable the security cameras. Abernathy had decided to fire Bell rather than report him to the police, fearing that it would damage the museum's reputation. He now deeply regretted that decision. Miller thanked Abernathy for his cooperation, but he knew that the security chief was still holding back something. He vowed to keep a close eye on him. The hunt for David Bell was now in full swing. The police were closing in, and Miller was confident that they would catch him soon. He knew that time was of the essence. The longer Bell remained at large, the greater the risk that he would sell the painting or destroy it. He had to be stopped. And Sarah's initial tip had made all the difference. They were on the right path. The painting would be found. Days turned into a blur of frantic activity. The police were following every lead, chasing down every possible sighting of David Bell. They checked pawn shops, art galleries, and known hideouts for criminals. But Bell remained elusive. Then, a break came. A tip from a truck stop waitress in a neighboring city led them to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The waitress recognized Bell from his photo on the news and remembered him asking for directions to the nearest art dealer. Miller immediately dispatched a team to the motel. They surrounded the building and prepared to move in. He hoped they were finally about to catch their man. Inside the motel room, the officers found Bell packing a suitcase. The starry night over the city was carefully wrapped in a blanket, hidden under a pile of clothes. Bell didn't resist arrest. He knew the game was up. As he was being led away in handcuffs, he confessed to the robbery, admitting that he had planned it for months. He explained that he had been desperate for money to pay off his gambling debts. He had seen the painting as his ticket to a new life, a chance to escape his troubles. He also revealed that he had disabled the security cameras himself, using his knowledge of the museum's security system. He had counted on getting away with it, but he had underestimated the power of a woman walking her dog. Miller felt a wave of relief wash over him. The case was finally closed. The painting was recovered. And justice would be served. He immediately contacted Sarah to give her the good news. "Ms. Miller," he said, "we caught him. We caught David Bell. And we recovered the painting. Sarah was overjoyed. She couldn't believe that her small piece of information had led to such a successful outcome. "Thank you, detective," she said. "Thank you for believing in me." "No, Ms. Miller," Miller replied. "Thank you. You and Max are the real heroes of this story. The painting would be safe. Belle would be in jail. All thanks to one woman and her dog." The case was finally closed. The news of Belle's arrest and the recovery of the Starry Night over the city spread like wildfire. The mayor held a press conference, praising the police department for their swift and decisive action. The museum announced a grand reopening celebration, with the painting as the centerpiece. Sarah and Max were invited to attend the celebration as guests of honor. They were greeted with cheers and applause as they entered the museum. People lined up to shake Sarah's hand and thank her for her bravery. Max, of course, lapped up all the attention, wagging his tail and basking in the adoration. Detective Miller made a point of publicly acknowledging Sarah and Max's contribution to the case. He presented them with a certificate of commendation, recognizing their outstanding service to the community. "If it weren't for Sarah's keen observation and Max's unwavering loyalty," he said, "this painting would still be missing. They are true heroes." The mayor also presented Sarah and Max with a key to the city, declaring them honorary citizens. It was a moment of great pride and joy for Sarah. She had never expected to be thrust into the spotlight, but she was grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. As she stood on the stage, accepting the accolades, she couldn't help but think about all the doubts and fears she had overcome. She had almost let her anxieties prevent her from coming forward, but she had persevered, thanks to Max's encouragement. She realized that even the smallest act of courage can have a profound impact. And that sometimes, the greatest heroes come in the most unexpected packages, even in the form of a woman walking her dog. The Starry Night over the city was once again hanging in its rightful place, a symbol of hope and beauty for the entire city. And Sarah and Max were celebrated as the ordinary citizens who had helped bring it home. The city was safe, the painting was returned, and the people were grateful. A true happy ending. With the main case closed, life slowly returned to normal. The museum reopened its doors, welcoming back art enthusiasts and tourists from all over the world. The Starry Night over the city once again graced the walls of the gallery, its vibrant colors shining brighter than ever before. Sarah and Max continued their morning walks, their routine undisturbed by the whirlwind of events that had recently engulfed their lives. They still walked past the museum, but now, they did so with a sense of pride and accomplishment. Sarah often wondered what had possessed her to come forward with her information. She was, by nature, a shy and introverted person. But something inside her had compelled her to act, to do the right thing. She also realized the importance of trusting her instincts, of listening to that inner voice that often gets drowned out by doubt and fear. And she learned that even the smallest act of courage can have a ripple effect, inspiring others to do the same. As for Max, he remained blissfully unaware of his role in solving the case. He was simply happy to be by Sarah's side, sniffing lampposts and chasing squirrels. But Sarah knew that he was more than just a loyal companion. He was her confidant, her encourager, and her furry little hero. Detective Miller often stopped by Sarah's house to thank her again for her help. He admitted that he had initially been skeptical of her information, but he had learned to trust his gut, just as she had. He also confessed that the case had changed him. He had become more open-minded, more willing to listen to the voices of ordinary citizens. He realized that the best detectives are not always the ones with the most experience or the highest IQ. They are the ones who are willing to listen, to learn, and to trust their instincts. And so, the story of the Starry Night over the city became a local legend, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can be found in the most unexpected places. And that sometimes, all it takes to change the world is a woman, a dog, and a little bit of courage. The world was a better place because of their actions. A few weeks later, Sarah received an unexpected invitation. It was from the City Museum, requesting her presence at a special ceremony. Intrigued, she accepted. On the day of the ceremony, Sarah arrived at the museum, Max by her side. She was surprised to see a large crowd gathered in the main gallery, the very same gallery where the Starry Night Over the City had been stolen. As she made her way through the crowd, she noticed familiar faces, Detective Miller, Mr. Abernathy, and even the mayor himself. She wondered what was going on. Suddenly, the mayor stepped onto the stage and addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are gathered here today to celebrate the recovery of the Starry Night Over the City and to honor the individuals who made it possible." He then proceeded to recount the story of the robbery, highlighting Sarah's crucial role in identifying the suspect. He spoke of her courage, her determination, and her unwavering commitment to justice. "And so," he continued, "it is with great pleasure that I present to Ms. Sarah Miller the City Medal of Honor, for her outstanding service to our community." The crowd erupted in applause as Sarah stepped onto the stage to receive the medal. She felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had never expected to be recognized in such a way. As she looked out at the sea of faces, she realized that she had done something truly special. She had helped to save a priceless work of art, a symbol of the city's cultural heritage. But more importantly, she had inspired others to speak up and act with courage, no matter how small their contribution may seem. Later that evening, Sarah and Max were enjoying a quiet evening at home when there was a knock at the door. It was Detective Miller. "Ms. Miller," he said, "I just wanted to thank you again for everything you did. You and Max are truly remarkable." He handed her a small, framed photograph. It was a picture of the Starry Night Over the City, taken just after it had been rehung in the museum. "I thought you might like to have this," he said, "as a reminder of your extraordinary contribution." Sarah smiled and took the photograph. "Thank you, Detective," she said. "I'll treasure it always." As Miller turned to leave, he paused for a moment. "Oh, and one more thing," he said. "The mayor asked me to give you this." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a check for a substantial sum of money. "The mayor wants to reward you for your bravery," Miller explained. "He hopes you'll use the money to do something special for yourself and Max." Sarah was stunned. She had never expected to receive any kind of reward for her actions. She had simply done what she thought was right. "Detective, I can't accept this," she said. "It's too much." "Please, Ms. Miller," Miller insisted. "The mayor wants you to have it. You deserve it." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, Detective," she said. "I'll accept it. But I promise to use it wisely." She decided to use the money to start a foundation in Max's name, dedicated to helping stray and abandoned animals. She wanted to honor Max's loyalty and compassion by giving back to the community. And so, the story of Sarah Miller and her dog, Max, became a testament to the power of ordinary citizens to make a difference in the world. A reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can have a lasting impact. And that sometimes, the greatest rewards are the ones that come from helping others. The world was a better place because they existed. That night, as Sarah drifted off to sleep, she couldn't help but smile. She had never imagined that her ordinary life could take such an extraordinary turn. She had always been content with her quiet routine, her simple pleasures. But now, she realized that she was capable of so much more. She had found her voice, her courage, and her purpose. And she had done it all with the help of her loyal companion, Max. She reached out and stroked Max's fur. He snuggled closer to her, his tail wagging softly. She knew that their bond was unbreakable. They had faced adversity together, and they had emerged stronger than ever. As she closed her eyes, she made a promise to herself, to always trust her instincts, to always speak up for what is right, and to always cherish the simple joys of life. And so, the story of Sarah Miller and her dog, Max, lived on, inspiring others to find their own courage and make a difference in the world. It was a story about the power of ordinary citizens, the importance of community, and the unwavering bond between a woman and her dog. The world was a better place, all thanks to their extraordinary act of courage. The end.